Hola. Hola. Hola a todas y a todos. Os presentamos a Farah Obaidullah. Ella es bióloga, pero sobre todo es una defensora de los océanos. Tiene una larguísima trayectoria de más de 20 años de trabajo profesional, viajando por todo el mundo y descubriendo las maravillas del mar, pero también siendo testigo de algunas de las prácticas más nefastas que se producen en los océanos. Entre sus principales logros ha ejecutado numerosas campañas para acabar con la pesca destructiva, ha trabajado con las comunidades afectadas y también ha llevado a cabo acciones del lobby para la protección de los océanos y ha estado muy involucrada en la visibilización de los crímenes vinculados con el mar, especialmente los que tienen que ver con el abuso laboral y las relaciones de esclavitud en relación con el trabajo en el mar. Ahora mismo está llevando una campaña muy activa para la moratoria de la minería en profundidad. Farah además es fundadora de dos organizaciones, de Ocean and Us and Women for Oceans. Además es editora de un libro que ahora os presentará ella, que está por aquí. Un libro que aborda temas muy interesantes y además ha sido escrito por mujeres, que tiene esta perspectiva súper interesante. Y además ha sido la productora ejecutiva de un film galardonado que se llama Into Deep, The True Cause of Deep Sea Mining. Es un placer para nosotras y una oportunidad enorme de tener voces diferentes en el instituto. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias y disculpe, pero yo voy a hablar en inglés. Puedo comprender casi todo en español, pero okay, so I'll speak in English. But thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll try and speak slowly. But if at any point there are, if there's anything that I say that you don't understand or, you want me to slow down even more, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll address that. As Sylvia mentioned, my name is Farah Obaidullah. I'm a longtime ocean advocate and founder of Women for Oceans and the Ocean in Us. But before I begin, since we are talking about women and the ocean, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge all the lives everywhere affected by war. At the moment, there are more women affected by war, genocide, and the climate crisis. And it is my belief that restoring nature and rediscovering our place in the natural world goes hand in hand with peace. If we don't have respect for nature, we won't have respect for each other. And if we don't respect each other, it is unlikely that we have a true regard for the natural world. And as the saying goes, you can judge a character by the way they treat animals, and this can be extended to the natural world as well. How we treat the natural world around us is a reflection of how we treat each other. But I'm here to talk about the ocean, our relationship with the ocean, and our ever-increasing encroachment of the ocean. Let me just also press play on this. In particular, I will offer a gendered lens on issues such as protecting the high seas, preventing the next disaster, that is deep sea mining, from starting, combating illegal fishing, IUU fishing, as well as discuss the very practical challenges women face in the ocean space. And I hope you will go away with a renewed understanding of why elevating the feminine perspective in the ocean space is so important. The ocean means different things to us. Each one of us sees the value of the ocean and therefore the approach to protecting it differently. There is no one-size-fits-all. Raising awareness about the ocean is all well and good, but if there's one thing that I've learned over 20 years of campaigning for the health of the ocean, we have to feel connected to the ocean in order for us to care. And we only protect what we love and feel connected to. And we only love or feel connected to what we know. And this is why bringing in diverse perspectives is so important, so we can reach as many people as possible. Because let's face it, we need all hands on deck. So what is important to me about the ocean is different to you, but one thing is common: we all need healthy oceans, whether it is to stabilize our climate, feed our family, or out of ancestral and cultural heritage. Now, I realize many of you here are ocean already have a lot of knowledge about the ocean, but just to recap and maybe just summarize, we know that the ocean covers 70% of the planet and provides 90% of the planet's habitable space. We know that the ocean gives us life. Much of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. The ocean provides us with food, jobs, and well-being. And importantly, the ocean regulates our climate. Yet we also know that the health of the ocean is in serious decline. Climate change, overfishing, and pollution are all wreaking havoc to life in the oceans and its ability to carry out the functions that sustain life as we know it. Did you know that the world's fish stocks, maybe you do, but are either fully fished or overfished, or that 1 in 5 fish is caught illegally, or that a staggering 10 to 15 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean each year, and that the oceans are warming, acidifying, and losing their oxygen content as a result of climate change. Corals, one of the most iconic forms of life in our ocean, are set to almost completely disappear by the middle of this century, and that's not very far away anymore. And all of this is deeply depressing, and most of the people I encounter, as I'm sure many of you also, do what you can in your daily lives to change things. And just 10 years ago, ocean plastic pollution was arguably the only major issue that gained widespread public attention. And as a result, we are seeing commitments to curb the plastic crisis, although not nearly enough is being done. The UN is only now in the middle of negotiating and developing a global plastics treaty. But the increasing challenges that the ocean faces can no longer be left to scientists, conservationists, and activists alone. Just like a sinking ship requires all of us to mobilize, we must now have all hands on deck to safeguard our lifeline, the ocean. As our understanding of the ocean increases, so too do the opportunities for exploiting resources. So whilst you and I are grappling with the challenges and finding ways as ocean and nature lovers, scientists, environmentalists, and concerned citizens to do what we can, what is in our power to mitigate these problems by, for example, ditching single-use plastics, abstaining from seafood, or reducing our carbon footprints, there is a new threat that looms on the horizon: deep sea mining. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I first want to spend a bit of time on my favorite part of the ocean, the high seas. This is quite literally the middle of the ocean. Those areas of the ocean that do not belong to any one single nation and are beyond, in technical terms, the legal jurisdiction of any nation. The high seas make up over 2/3 of the ocean, and this translates to essentially half of our planet. And why is this my favorite part of the ocean? Well, they belong to no one, and therefore they belong to all of us. And as someone raised by 2 parents of very different cultures, having attended international schools and having had the privilege of traveling through much of the world, including on the high seas, I feel very connected to the high seas. Just as the high seas are international waters, so too am I an international citizen. But also I spent time roaming some of the high seas, and I have experienced firsthand what the challenges are of governing this vast part of our planet. The high seas are largely ungoverned. They are like the Wild West of the ocean. Sure, there's a patchwork of organizations and treaties aimed at managing some of our activities on the ocean, such as regional fisheries management organizations like the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission or the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, the International Seabed Authority, and so on. I'm sure you're all very familiar with some of these treaties. But these instruments look at only one activity, one area or set of commercially interesting fishes. There is no single comprehensive framework that protects life on the high seas. And yes, just last year, after 20 years of negotiations, we now do have a treaty for the sustainable use and protection of life in areas beyond national jurisdiction. But this treaty still needs to be ratified and entered into force. I believe there's now 2 countries that are ratified it, Palau and Chile, but we need 60 countries before it has any effect. Moreover, the provisions of this treaty are such that they cannot undermine existing instruments, frameworks, and bodies. So it may still be a few years before this new High Seas Treaty takes effect, and just how effective the treaty will be determined by the political will of those in power. So what do I mean by the challenges of governing activities on the high seas? Remember, I just mentioned that 1 in 5 fish is caught illegally. Well, over the years, I've spent time documenting fish crimes at sea. And what are fish crimes? Well, they include a whole host of activities from fish and money laundering to human trafficking, labor abuse, and slavery at sea. But when we talk about fish being caught illegally, more specifically, we mean illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing. Illegal fishing quite simply means fishing in contravention of applicable laws regarding fish size, net size, area closures, and so on. Unreported fishing just means that fish caught that is not officially recorded anywhere or that is misreported. An example of this is high grading, where a vessel continues to catch fish beyond their quota in search of only the highest grade fish, replacing previously caught fish within their quota with higher value specimens. It's a very wasteful practice. And then finally, unregulated fishing, which is all fishing that happens by vessels that are not bound by regional fisheries management organizations, or where no management regime exists, or by vessels that target fish for which there are no applicable rules. So with this patchwork of instruments and the fact that not all countries are bound to fishing rules on the high seas, for example, if they are not party to the relevant fisheries management organization, the high seas are a perfect playground for unregulated fishing. Moreover, the lack of eyes and ears on the high seas, or monitoring, surveillance, and enforcement, means that fish crimes are rife in these areas. But more importantly is that there is a lack of accountability on the high seas. And let me explain what I mean. On one of my expeditions documenting fish crimes, our crew bore witness to a transshipment happening on the high seas in the Western and Central Pacific Ocean, involving multiple catcher vessels and a reefer flagged to Cambodia. Transshipment basically means, for those that don't know, the transfer of catch from one vessel, usually the catcher vessel, to another vessel, usually the refrigerated cargo vessel or the reefer. When we boarded and inspected the reefer, to find that the captain had not kept logbooks detailing the transfer of the catch, how much, and from which boat. No crew manifests, and no details of even the ships he was offloading from and that we were actually witnessing. Now, I'm used to boarding vessels with a bridge filled with high-tech screens, radars, and communication gadgets. But this ship had a bare minimum. I mean, it was a huge cargo vessel, but it had almost nothing on board. No screens, no gadgets. The captain had a handheld GPS, global positioning system, and a satellite phone. And he took orders from his boss on land, which I believe was the Philippines, to tell him, give him the coordinates of where he had to go. It was as simple as that. Those 2 devices is what he used to navigate in the ocean. The ship's hold, the size of a basketball court, several meters high, was 3/4 full with tuna, mostly skipjack tuna, and there was no way of knowing where it was caught or by whom. The fact that we were on the high seas and that the reefer was flagged to a country that was not a member of the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission, it's the body charged with managing tuna in the region, made it impossible for us to alert anyone with authority. The closest territorial waters, and therefore country, was Palau. And in fact, for the entire expedition, we had a Palauan enforcement officer on board, 2 actually, and even while this incident unfolded. So I made a call to the Attorney General's office of Palau, and as expected, Palau, although willing, was powerless to act. I made the point that the ship would be passing through Palauan waters on its way to the Philippines, and still Palau was unable to act. We trailed the ship for a few days and witnessed it changing its name, which is in contravention of the IMO, as I'm sure you know, the International Maritime Organization. They had also conveniently covered their IMO number. And this is the number that is unique to the vessel and should not change, even if the name changes and the flag changes. So this case illustrated all too well the lack of governance on the high seas and the desperate need for better international cooperation. We had all the information about the vessels in question, including visual evidence of transshipment, lack of proper catch data, and documented the overt change of name as well as dumping of fuel at sea. We knew where the ship was destined for, and yet there was nothing we could do and no one we could alert to stop this illegal catch from reaching the global tuna market. And I mentioned the flags, that it was a Cambodian flag vessel and the destination was the Philippines, but this, in my experience, could be anything. It could be South Korean. I've experienced a lot of Spanish vessels at sea as well and catching tuna, oftentimes illegally. So this is, I don't want to single out any single country, but it's the problem of lack of oversight in the high seas. So, and it's unfortunate that these stories abound in these areas, and it is for this reason that I'm very concerned about the new threat that is deep sea mining. And what is deep sea mining? Deep sea mining is a destructive, extractive industry that has yet to happen on the high seas. So we haven't started yet. It is quite literally the practice of mining the seabed for minerals. And if allowed to go ahead, there is a very real risk that it can happen as early as next year. With even applications being submitted this year. And if allowed to go ahead, there is deep sea mining will cause irreversible damage to life in the deep ocean, to ancient deep sea ecosystems, and it risks disturbing locked away carbon. We all know where that the ocean is the world's largest carbon sink. That carbon often is locked away in our seabed. So if we start disturbing that carbon will be re-released into the water column. And the idea is to send gargantuan ships to the bottom of the ocean to strip mine it for minerals, and it's quite literally an experiment in ocean chemistry that we cannot afford. So let's explore the deep sea for a moment. The deep sea is defined as the ocean below 200 meters and can extend for kilometers deep, the deepest point being the Mariana Trench at 11 kilometers in the Pacific Ocean. The deep sea makes about 90% of the volume of the ocean and 95% of Earth's livable space. And most of the deep sea is in the high sea, so again, those areas beyond national jurisdiction. And given the size, this vast size, it's no surprise that the deep sea, as you know, boasts a wide range of topographical features, including mountains or seamounts taller than our tallest peaks on land, as well as gullies and underwater hydrothermal vents, and of course a wealth of undiscovered life. The deep sea has largely remained undiscovered because technology is only just beginning to allow us to access this area and to explore it. In fact, 99% of the deep ocean is yet to be discovered, but there may be, well, we don't know, but there may be several million species living down there. But what we do know about the deep ocean is that it is rich in biodiversity and that life in the deep sea is vulnerable. That's because under such enormous pressures, with no light, life is very slow growing and very slow to reproduce. Fish such as orange roughy can reach over 200 years old and only reach sexual maturity at about 30. You may have heard of the Greenland shark, a deep sea shark that can reach over 400 years old. And corals, and I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new, but they can reach several thousand years old. And speaking of corals, I think more than over half of the world's corals actually live in the deep sea. So with life growing so slowly in the deep ocean, you can imagine that it responds poorly to disturbance. In fact, we know that when we damage the deep sea habitat through, for example, deep sea bottom trawling, it will take decades, if not hundreds of years, of life to return. And we also know through studies published in 2021 that disturbing the seabed through bottom trawling again releases vast quantities of carbon back into the water column and then eventually back into the atmosphere. And some parts of the ocean are also rich in minerals, mineral deposits, and it is these minerals that a handful of speculative mining companies want to exploit. The polymetallic nodules found along, there's three types. The polymetallic nodules found along the abyssal plains of the deep ocean. They are about the size of a lump of coal and sit on the seabed. They are rich in nickel, cobalt, manganese, And these nodules have taken millions of years to form and provide essential habitat for animals such as the Casper octopus, which lays her eggs on these nodules or around these nodules. The second type are the polymetallic sulfides from her hydrothermal vents. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents support some of the most unique and ecologically important communities known to science. In fact, an enzyme isolated from a microbe found in the deep-sea hydrothermal vents is used in the COVID-19 test. And the third type of deposits are the cobalt crusts found along seamounts. But it is the polymetallic nodules on the deep sea bed that are of the most interest in the short term to the miners, the speculative miners, and specifically those in an area known as the Clarion-Clipperton Zone in the Pacific Ocean. In fact, some of you may have read about this area in the news, that more than 5,000 new species were recently discovered in that area. And deep-sea mining for nodules involves strip mining the seafloor, essentially sucking up these nodules and leaving a wake of destruction in its path. Aside from the direct and immediate destruction of deep-sea habitat, deep-sea mining will cause plumes of sediment along the seafloor and in the water column above it. And it could these plumes will spread for many, many kilometers and miles beyond those areas that are actually mined. And the suspended sediment risks suffocating fish and life in the water column, as well as life on the seabed as it settles down to the ocean floor. Wastewater and noise pollution from deep-sea mining will further impact life in the ocean. And what I mean by wastewater is that once the nodules reach the surface by these suction pipes and are collected on board ships, they are cleaned of sediment, which is going to be laden with heavy metals, and then that wastewater will be dumped back into the ocean, causing secondary plumes. And then by what is essentially dredging the sea bed for nodules, collecting as much as 30 centimeters of seabed sediment beneath the nodules, there's a very real risk of disturbing that carbon that is locked away there. And we don't yet understand what the consequences of this will be, and even if you imagine that it takes a long time for that re-released carbon to reach back to the surface, it may in the meantime interfere with the ocean's biological pump and the carbon cycle. For example, it may exacerbate ocean acidification. It would therefore make sense to, before we decide to pursue such a high-risk and irreversibly destructive new industry, that we at least understand fully what we are getting ourselves into. And this is exactly what scientists are saying. In fact, more than 800 scientists are calling for a pause to deep-sea mining, and you can join that movement as well. We are currently living through a sixth mass extinction. We have already lost more than 2/3 of global wildlife. The climate and biodiversity crisis are upon us. And now, as the world pours its attention to issues on land such as war and energy, the cost of living crises, this reckless industry is poised to take foot. And once it does, we will see a new gold rush begin, a race to the bottom of the ocean for minerals. And remember, this is half our planet, so if one country begins, all the floodgates will open and every country can go down there, and we will see a new era of colonialism begin. So who is in charge of deciding or allowing or not allowing deep-sea mining to go ahead in the high seas? Well, it is the international organization called the International Seabed Authority, or ISA, established under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And this body is tasked with regulating any future mining activities, and in doing so, it must ensure the effective protection of the deep sea, recognizing that the deep sea is designated as the common heritage of humankind. The ISA has so far granted 31 deep-sea mining exploration contracts amounting to an area of 1.3 million square kilometers, licensed to date. And there are a couple of aggressive companies sponsored by countries pushing to mine the deep sea at all cost. And as with everything, once one country starts mining, then they all begin. And that's 31 exploration licenses that could just become exploitation licenses. But the momentum is building, so this is the good news, to put a stop to this emerging industry. Frontline communities of where the industry wants to begin, Pacific Island communities, they reject deep-sea mining. Hundreds of NGOs and civil society groups are saying no to deep-sea mining. Fishing associations are saying no to deep sea mining. And of course, the ocean-loving community from surfers to sailors are saying no to deep sea mining. And in fact, 25 countries, including Spain, are now calling for a moratorium on deep sea mining. Sorry, I have a itch in my throat. And as I said, hundreds of scientists are also calling for this pause. And I think you've seen on the slide behind me, there are tech and electric vehicle companies that are speaking out against deep sea mining. Companies like BMW, Volvo, Volkswagen, Renault, and so on, because they have the foresight to realize that we don't need those metals in our battery chemistry going forward. Sorry, I'm just recovering from a throat infection as well, so obviously. So in short, there is no social license to mine the deep sea. Sorry. But it's not hard to imagine that, you know, this is an industry that doesn't fit in the world we're trying to build for the next, you know, for this century, one that is no longer based on make, waste, and one that we want a future that is going to be circular. And so this is an industry that's easy to reject. It isn't happening yet, no jobs are at stake, but we know that once it starts, it will be difficult to stop or even regulate. How are we going to audit this industry? Who has the jurisdiction or the money to go down several kilometers into the ocean depths to see if miners are following the rules? And how will we regenerate these areas? Thinking back to my example of illegal fishing, how are we going to hold companies and countries to account? Who will spend the political capital to uphold regulations in an area that belongs to no one? We can't afford to make the same mistakes as we have in our past. Look at how long it is taking us to wean off of fossil fuels. And that's because for so long, governments and companies have argued that there is too much at stake. Too many jobs, too much investment in infrastructure from extraction to distribution. I get it, it's a gigantic ship to turn. But with everything we know about how destructive deep sea mining is, why even begin? And here's the thing we don't need to. Those that want to mine the deep sea argue we need the minerals found in the deep sea, like cobalt, manganese, and nickel, to power our electric vehicles and our tech gadgets. But this argument is flawed. For one, there are enough minerals on land to meet the demand for metals. Even the industry said so. Although, yes, we absolutely must improve the way we do land mining, but also why aren't we recovering metals from our waste streams? Why are we dumping and incinerating waste that contains these precious metals? Why isn't urban mining a thing? One recent study published says that we can meet up to 58% of our demand for metals just by recovering them from waste streams. Innovations such as bioleaching are already making promising breakthroughs in recovering metals from waste. So we should be investing in that. And time is running out to stop this industry. But the good news is, because of the pressure we have already brought to bear, the Council of the ISA decided to push forward a decision on whether to open the deep sea to mining to July 2025. And in this time, they hope to finalize a mining code. This is good news because it means that our voices matter, that we have so far managed to stop this industry. We have this agency, but we must build on this groundswell resistance to stop deep sea mining and ensure that it is not allowed to go ahead. That's the film if you want to learn more about it. And in there we also talk to BMW and we talk to scientists. So I encourage you to watch that. But now coming back to my passion for the high seas and what makes them exciting. And I suppose that's why all of you work here. But it's like exploring a whole new world. And as we innovate, the blue and the blue economy takes off, I think we will see so much more activity happening on the high seas. You know, we with population growth and diminishing land availability, including land loss due to climate change, we will increasingly look to the ocean. We might start occupying the ocean. We might start living on or beneath the waves. Imagine floating cities at sea, underwater research stations, resupply centers, all at sea. And so it is therefore really important that we enter this world with caution, armed with knowledge and good governance structures. Most of the treaties we see today were negotiated in the last century. They do not reflect the needs of this and future generations. They do not consider the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. They do not consider feminine perspectives. They are unfit for purpose. But with the high seas, we can get it right. We can ensure that the treaty that governments have spent most of this century negotiating is swiftly ratified and entered into force. We then must ensure that the treaty takes precedence over archaic instruments. It is exciting to know that this new treaty does consider or have in its text traditional and indigenous knowledge and gender equality. But for now, these are just words. The proof will be in the implementation of the treaty. At the heart of all my efforts to safeguard the ocean, it is my belief that in order to accelerate ocean solutions, we must understand our relationship with the ocean, promote the diversity of people working around the world for the ocean, and we must step up our ocean knowledge across society. And it's for this reason that I set up Women for Oceans, now a project of the Ocean and Us. This platform raises the feminine perspective in the ocean space. So many of us across cultures and geographies already do amazing work for the ocean. The idea is that we can accelerate our efforts to turn the tide for the ocean by connecting with people we can relate to or who inspire us. If we break down the barriers that divide us by virtue of our job title, geography, and culture, we are united in our quest for healthy oceans. Now, why is gender balance in the ocean space important? I don't think I need to tell you, but as a species, we are very diverse. And we know from the business world that diversity improves the bottom line of a company. So the same is true for ocean solutions. The more perspectives we bring in, the faster we will develop solutions. In my view, if we had embraced feminine perspectives in the development of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, we would not have left half of our planet without any meaningful governance. We would have considered the innate value of the high seas, the undiscovered value of the high seas, the collective value of the high seas, the future value of the high seas. And to be clear, feminine perspectives are not exclusive to women. We all possess a feminine side, but we have chosen to reward and be guided by our patriarchal side, as is now evident in all our systems, be they political, judicial, or financial. But we can do better. Also, coming back to the fishing industry and my work in exposing fish crimes, did you know that worldwide 1 in 2 seafood workers is a woman? If you have traveled to fishing communities, this figure is not surprising. Whilst it is often men that go out to sea to catch the fish, women are the ones processing the fish, marketing the fish, as well as the ones repairing the nets, for example. And in aquaculture, some 70% of the workforce are in fact women. So why then are women not proportionately represented in decision-making, be it at the local, regional, or global level? And the same is true for academia. There's plenty of women in conservation and science, but why are they not represented at the leadership levels? And this matters. Women have insights that are necessary to make good ocean policy and fisheries policy. Women are quite literally the eyes and ears of the industry. If there is organized fish crime, for example, chances are the women know about it and want to act to stop it because they know their sons or their husbands' lives are in danger. We see this in, for example, in South Africa, the crime around the abalone trade, or in Mexico with the illegal totoaba trade that is killing the vaquita, the world's most endangered cetaceans. In my own experience at sea, documenting fish crimes, being a woman was what often gave me access to the ship's hold or logbooks. It was disarming for a woman to board a vessel and ask questions. We need to talk to women and ensure that women are an equal part of the conversation. Of course, there are also very practical challenges that women face in the ocean or maritime world. I'll just mention some of them, and I'm pretty sure that many of you are aware as well, and have many more examples. But safety at sea, for example. In many situations, safety gear on vessels is designed for men. For example, survival suits are too big but also not designed for the female body. Then there are onboard medical facilities, again catering for male physiology, onboard sanitation facilities not accounting for women's monthly menstrual cycles. Also, as women are often in the minority onboard vessels, we have the added factor of the risk of sexual assault or harassment to consider. And this is a very real problem. Time spent at sea can be a lonely experience, and this can tempt unwanted behaviors. I've seen this on offshore installations as well as on vessels. And it's not surprising, given that 2% of seafarers are women. But if we want to attract more women into ocean industries, then we need to see this change. And I know, and I'm sure many of you know this too, but when you enter a room and you're in the minority, it's very difficult to express yourself fully. You are stifled by the fact that you are in the minority. This could be if you are a man entering a woman full of women, you don't feel as comfortable speaking out. And this is what women and people, minorities face all the time. And the problem with that is it stifles our ability to contribute the best of who we are in that space. So what does Women for Oceans do? We run an online directory of ocean women, whereby women can be found by key search terms, such as area of work, for example, sharks, plastic, fish crimes, but they can also be found by city, by country, by name. This directory makes a tangible difference in terms of championing women's opportunities and helping them to take their place in society by addressing 3 hurdles. 1, it diffuses the notion that there are not enough women or female ocean specialists to approach for speaking opportunities, such as on panels, as keynote speakers, roundtables, and so on, and particularly at high-level events. But 2, it makes women visible in otherwise invisible roles, where just by their representation in the directory, they effectively show that women can be and are as successful in ocean-related fields. And finally, it connects ocean women to each other and enables the development of a supportive community. Women can find like-minded women, ocean peers in their location, or experts wherever they are in the world. And this is important because we want to accelerate ocean solutions. So if you decide in Senegal, for example, you want to protect sharks, through this directory, you can connect with somebody that does a similar project in the Bahamas or the UK or the Philippines, and that way you can share information, perhaps template letters to ministers, or so that you don't have to always seek formal channels, but you can get active quickly. Now, also by alerting conference organizers to this directory, Women for Oceans has had a direct impact on raising awareness on the need to diversify speakers and participants, and it provides a tool to improve gender balance. In addition, we also developed a gender balance bingo app, calling out gender and other imbalances at conferences in a fun and yet constructive way. In the European Union, we are a member of the WinBig consortium to promote women in the blue economy. Just last month, we launched a survey to establish a baseline of where we are at with gender in the ocean space. The project will run for several years and will include workshops and online materials. It is vital that we bring more women into the ocean space. And then Sylvia mentioned as well, but last year we produced a book, The Ocean and Us. This book explores all the ways our lives interact with the ocean and provides suggestions of all the things we can do to improve ocean health. Topics include the role of fish in the carbon cycle, shipping, overfishing, noise pollution in the ocean tourism, the aquarium trade, and marine animal welfare. It brings together the expertise of over 35 ocean specialists in 32 informative and inspiring chapters, and each is written in easy-to-follow language. And of course, each chapter is written by a woman. And specific to this, to this session, but there are 3 chapters very relevant to understanding and unpacking gender in the ocean. So there's a chapter on gender in the oceans, there's a chapter on lived experiences of the challenges women face. They are contributions from the experts that contributed to the book. And there's a chapter on the impacts of coloniality on women, particularly women of color, in the ocean space. So these are just a few of the ways that through my platform I bring to light the importance of not just gender diversity in ocean science and conservation, but all human diversity. As a biologist, I can't help about how our genetic diversity makes us stronger and more resilient. And I believe this is true when it comes to movement building and conservation efforts as well. The more diverse we are, the more people we reach, and the more resilient we are. Also, as a biologist, I think about how there's no other animal that I know of that has successfully oppressed one half of its population. If they did, they would die. And let's face it, after so many generations of suppressing the feminine across so many cultures, we are not doing a very good job ourselves. We are failing humanity, and we must bring back that balance if we are not just to survive, but to thrive going forward. I'd like to end with some exciting news about our new project. On my way back from the International Seabed Authority in July last year, I thought about how we can make the deep sea come alive for people. The urgency of the campaign is real, and the window to stop this disaster is closing. If we think about the collective value of the high seas and this new era of colonialism and ecocide that deep sea mining in our global commons represents, it is clear to me that we simply cannot afford to let this happen. Let collectivism for once prevail. So the idea of the Ocean Hope Tour, the Ocean Hope Project, was born, and this project connects people to the ocean, engaging with key stakeholders, including First Nations, scientists, tech companies, universities, conservation groups, and fishing communities to gather support for a global moratorium on deep sea mining. The collective declaration will be presented to the International Seabed Authority in 2025. The plan is to travel along the coast of the western coast of the Americas, along the Pacific coast. Why? Because that's ground zero for deep sea mining, if it's allowed to go ahead. And then along the way, we will invite high-profile people, whether they are celebrities or musicians or artists or political figures, to join us, and they can share what the ocean means to them. They can share poems, art, music. So we really try and reach as many people outside of our ocean bubble as possible. So preventing the next disaster is one of the biggest levers of hope we can offer people around the world that are feeling helpless by the multitude of crises we feel today. We have some great partnerships we're developing, and I can tell you about that afterwards during lunch as well, but with the music industry, Earth Percent, a climate foundation powered by musicians, as well as leading sailors and from the Ocean Race. That will be here actually next week as well for the Decade of Ocean Science. But I hope you will support and follow our journey. And if you have ideas for partners or ways to get involved yourselves, please be in touch. I can't emphasize enough to thank you first of all for everything you do for the ocean, but to really say that your voice matters. We really have to take this knowledge out into the world, and you are agents of that. So I hope this talk has inspired you a bit to think about the broader issue of the ocean beyond the area that you are studying and contributing knowledge to. So now I'll end here. I hope there have been some interesting insights to why gender matters in the ocean space. As much as we know about the ocean, there's always more to learn. So I hope I've inspired and intrigued you. Thank you. I think we're going into questions, right? A discussion or something?
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I really enjoy. You say so many things that, but I really follow you, and I was really good. I think that you will be these days here. We will have time for discussing and everything, which will be amazing. But maybe I can ask you a question regarding my work. I'm working with aquaculture.
Yep.
And you also mentioned about aquaculture, and also I just very fast read the index of your book,
Yeah.
and you have a chapter there. And I would like to have a little bit of your opinion about the benefits or something
About this, sorry?
the advantages or the disadvantages of aquaculture that can have from your point of view, no?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like, the difference between addressing this audience and other audiences is sometimes because I know you are very well versed in ocean issues, so I hope my answer is maybe you know all these challenges with aquaculture, but we know that aquaculture could provide a solution for food security, right? We know that it's possible, but it is the way that we do it that we have to really consider carefully, right? So we know that, for example, if we have open pen farms, then what we input into that farm is going to impact wild populations around those farms. We know that, for example, depending on the species we are farming, it can require a lot of wild feed to grow those fish. So, for example, with salmon, it's very inefficient in terms of energy. We're taking more wild fish out of the ocean to feed farmed salmon. So it's not sustainable. But also, we see in different. I mean, aquaculture is such a broad industry that if we think of shrimp farming or other types of farming in Southeast Asia, a lot of land, particularly coastal areas, are destroyed for those farms. And so whilst they provide employment, often not depending on the farm, sometimes those conditions are harrowing, but it comes at a huge cost to coastal ecosystems, to coastal defenses. So there's a lot of issues that can really be a disadvantage to aquaculture, but it's all in how we do it. If we ensure that systems are closed on land, I know that there were some projects in the Netherlands, for example, which is where I'm from, where they were using heat from power plants to warm the water for those for the shrimp, I think the gambas that they were farming. So this was really efficient because you didn't have to fly gambas from the tropics, so that was good for the carbon footprint, and you didn't have to heat the water because it was wastewater anyway, or heated water anyway. So I don't know. I mean, there are advantages because yes, we can feed lots of people with aquaculture, but we can also decide, okay, let's focus on low, fish sort of lower in the trophic system, like tilapia or fish that are vegetarian, because that lowers the not just the carbon footprint, but the how do you call it, the trophic footprint. We require less feed to grow those fish. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I really like your answer, and I also share your opinion regarding this, no? Because it has a lot of advantages and some disadvantages, but I still believe that these disadvantages is because the way we are doing the aquaculture. So we really can improve and can be much more sustainable as it is now, but it's a future when you compare with the fisheries and with the problem with declining all these fish that we are catching, not and so we really have a problem on our hands, and aquaculture can give you some solutions about this, but we really need to do it well.
Yeah, it can, but it also, I mean, for example, with salmon, I was just discussing with Esther before, but I'm reading a book called Not on My Watch by Alexandra Morton. She's a whale scientist out in British Columbia, but now her focus is on fighting the salmon farms, because they are Atlantic salmon introduced to the Pacific and coming with a whole host of issues because they're given antibiotics, they have no resilience, they escape into wild populations, they spread disease, and the whales have disappeared, and the ecosystem is deteriorating along that coast. And it's not about food security, because salmon is not food security. Salmon is a high-end fish. It's for high-end markets. If we really are trying to address food security, we would approach aquaculture differently as well. If it's really about distribution of protein to where it is needed, then we would be thinking differently. But this is about profit. Where can we grow expensive fish to sell to our high-end markets? Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Well, thanks for the talk. Maybe you can, one of the things that you explained, but I was maybe you didn't catch it very much, but maybe you can explain us a little better in your work with illegal fishing. How did you manage to actually get into these vessels that are illegally fishing? And then you said at the end, and that's why it came to my mind again, that it was actually an advantage being a woman or something like that. Maybe you can
Yeah,
expand
sure.
that.
No, I mean, it's, being a woman has its advantages as well. So these vessels, they often spend years out at sea, fishing vessels on the high seas, right, because of transshipment. Vessels do not have to return to port to offload catch. They do it on the high seas through transshipment. The result is that the crew have spent years at sea. They haven't seen a woman for years. And so, of course, it's an attractive proposition when you call them on the radio and you say, hey, my name is Farah, I'd like to, first of all, the voice is very sort of, very soft-spoken, and it's not a threat. It's never considered a threat. And so, so I have never been denied access on board, even illegal. Most of the vessels I've boarded are illegal vessels because these crew are human. They're just human beings, and they just want human contact. And so they welcome you, they give you food, they are very hospitable, even though you know that they are operating for criminals. They are working for criminals. But they themselves are humans. They have families at home. They have, they're just trying to earn a living, and so they can be very, very generous. And then also, so not only do you have access, but and it doesn't always happen just at sea, but also in port. For example, when I was documenting, for example, illegal shark catches, men can be very proud, right? So they want to show off. They don't think, oh, this is a woman, maybe she, is, maybe she's going to expose what I'm doing, but they really invite you in and they show you, oh yeah, we catch tuna, but let me show you all these sharks we caught as well. They don't have a quota to catch a shark, but they're very proud to show me their sharks. And yeah, so this is what I mean by it's disarming. I know that my male colleagues would not be able to call and say, hey, can I come on board? Like, no, it's like pirates. No, not allowing you on board, But this is what I mean by advantage, yeah. I mean, we always boarded respectfully and everything else because I always recognize they are not the criminals. They are under instruction from whoever, usually millionaires, billionaires, whatever, that run these industries to catch. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
We will have Farah with us all the week because she is participating in the satellite event on Monday here in the organized by Silvia Donoso, and you will have the opportunity to talk to her.
Yeah, and if you feel like asking a question in Spanish, please do. I'm sure if I don't understand it, Esther can also.
I have one question because without minimizing all the catastrophic things that you show, is there any hope? Is there any positive?
So really for me, the hope comes paired with hard work, right? Hope is just living with hope is not enough, right? But it's the idea that we can stop something. That's what gives me hope. Because, I saw recently in The Guardian, I think, again, new articles about slavery at sea, and this is a huge issue that I've worked on for 15 years. And even though there are many more rules, there's always new ways to flout those rules, and, so I feel I feel despair, right? We have more CO2 entering the atmosphere every year than the year before. Despite what we know about the climate crisis, despite all the green, initiatives. So all of that makes me feel helpless. But with the deep sea mining, I feel hope because enough is enough. And I think if we can mobilize enough people, we can stop deep sea mining. And if we can stop deep sea mining, it's also a way of uniting countries on a common issue, which we really need. The world is more divided than ever before. If we can do like we did with the Antarctic Treaty, which is already a few decades old now, if we can, that's where countries came together and said, you know what, Antarctic is off limits. I would love to see that for the high seas, that it's an area of peace and science because we need that. And if we can say, okay, you know, we're not starting some destructive industry there, then we are showing we have agency. And if we have agency, we might have more energy to fight against the injustices we see. Because right now that's lacking. Our efforts are not paying off. And so my answer to you is my hope and hard work sits in stopping the next disaster, which is deep sea mining.
Good, thank you. Any other question? No? So then we will thank you to be here for your talk.
And I'm sorry that I had a coughing fit in between, but that was just
Thank you very much.